right, we made it. Episode 3. Hey everybody, thanks for coming. My name is Curtis Childs. As always, I am with Swedenborg Foundation. Swedenborg Foundation is a nonprofit that's mission is to get these ideas, the ideas that Swedenborg expressed and wrote about, out into the conversation, which is what we're doing here. So I thank you for coming, hanging out with us today. We are working if this is your first time here, we're working our way through this book, which is called Our Life After Death out there. And you can download this book for free if you would like. We have a link set up here. We made it short so that if you want to just type it into your computer, you can do that, and you can get a free PDF or ebook of this and follow right along. We'll be going from the PDF directly off the website. If that's not working for you, the link, you can go to swedenborg.com, and bottom left, it should be under new releases, or go to their ebook section. You can download it there for free. So we're going to move through. But before we start, let's try to get in a good mindset to absorb this information. I want to talk about love and wisdom and the pairing of the two. In Swedenborg didn't just write about life after death. He wrote about everything. Basically, I would say every facet of life he touched on in some regard. So while he had a lot to say about, what's in the life to come, he also had a lot to say about how to live this life that we're in right now. One of the things that he talks about is this pairing of love and wisdom. He has this duality. If you read any of his books at length, you'll see this is all over good and truth, it's sometimes called. And where it's expressed here is this idea that we're going here to try to gain knowledge. We're going to go through this book, this text, try to learn stuff, but knowledge is best used to become more loving. So if you're gaining information to try to be a person who's going to be more empathetic, more altruistic, more helpful, then you're using knowledge for what it was originally created for. So let's see if we can't get a little of that love plus wisdom here. All right. So we're going to be looking at Our Life After Death. Let's go to the PDF right now. We're on page 12. So if you're just starting, you can scroll down, get to page 12. We're right in the middle of a chapter here about how we are inwardly. The title is Inwardly, Each of Us is a Spirit. We're going to pick up right at the top of this page. Well, before I begin, I forgot to say, this is, I'm talking to you live, but I would love to hear your response, your feedback, and your ideas as well. So what we do is we try to take live questions and comments and kind of have that shape the discussion. And so the way that you can participate in that is, if you're watching this on YouTube, just comment like you'd comment on any YouTube video and leave your question or your comment there, and we'll get to it. Or if you came here from Facebook and you don't have a YouTube or a Google account, go back to wherever you found this and leave your question there, and we'll find it and we'll get it up here. So I'll be periodically stopping to take a look at questions. So please get some up there, and because I don't want it just to be what I think about things. I want to hear what you guys think as well as we all try to move through the mysteries of life. Okay, now we're really going to get back to the PDF. All right. So we begin. We may conclude that we are spirits with respect to our inner self from the fact that after we depart from our bodies, which happens when we die, we are still alive and just as human as ever. And so he uses, and we touched on this last time, he uses this term human. The word human can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. People will say, "Oh, I'm only human," as in lighten up, or they'll say, that they'll use human as in a positive sense. You'll say that's inhumane if something is evil. So humanity has sort of a moral connotation to it. When he's talking about human here, he's just talking about as in you're a person. You have eyes, you can see, you can hear, because there was kind of this idea back in the day that after you die, you're just kind of disembodied consciousness. But he's saying that life in the afterlife has a lot of similarities to this life, and that we are similar units, if that makes sense. Anyway, so we're going to get back to the text. To convince me of this, I was allowed to talk with almost all the people I had ever met during their physical lives, with some for a few hours, with some for weeks and months, and with some for years. This was primarily so that I could be convinced and could bear witness. And I like this last sentence here. This is kind of getting at Swedenborg's mission. And this will come up again later, I believe, in today's reading, why did Swedenborg have all these experiences? So for brief background, if you haven't heard of him, Swedenborg was a scientist who was doing pretty well, was top of his fields in Europe in his time, and he began to have what we would today call spiritual experiences. He had a series of vivid dreams that led to waking visions and all kinds of lucid experiences where he was seeing this whole other world. But why? I mean, a lot of people these days report near-death experiences or other spiritual experiences, but why did Swedenborg get such a bounty of this stuff? And he's saying here that the reason I was shown this is so I could tell you guys about it. And so we're here being told about it and learning about it. So really, all these experiences came to Swedenborg for us so that we could learn more about this life we're all involved in. All right, looking back, he says, I may add here that even while we are living in our bodies, each one of us is, with respect to our spirits, in a community with other spirits, even though we are unaware of it. By means of their spirits, good people are in angelic communities, and even evil people are in hellish communities. So that's kind of that, the angel on the shoulder and the devil on the shoulder. He's saying that that's really how it functions in some ways. And if you missed our first episode where we talk a lot about the Swedenborgian concept of hell, it might be worth taking a peek at that. They're both mental states. You can see that here in this imagery that we're communicating with both all the time. That's why you get this duality in your mind of really constructive, positive thoughts and impulses and really destructive, negative, self-defeating or antisocial impulses. Swedenborg says it's because our spirits are in the spiritual world right now. We have a spirit and a body. A lot of people are saying that, but he's saying that just like your body is somewhere in the physical world and it's being influenced by the people you interact with, in the spiritual world, your spirit is there and it's being influenced by the spiritual company that you're keeping. So briefly, angelic communities would be people who are focused on love, who are focused on serving other people, helping other people, and hellish communities are self-centered, intent on exploiting and harming other people. So that's what he's talking about when he says this here. And getting back to the text, he says so good people in angelic communities and evil people are in hellish communities. Furthermore, we come into those same communities when we die. People who are coming into the company of spirits after death are often told and shown this. So it's kind of like, people will say, am I going to go to heaven? Am I going to go to hell? Swedenborg is saying we're already there. I mean, you're already associating with the parts of the spiritual world that respond to the kind of person you are. The kind of choices that you make, what your priorities are, how you view other people has a lot to do with it. And so that when we wake up in the spiritual world, it's not like, so we get assigned a place. It's like you're already entrenching yourself. You're already connecting with the community that kind of lines up with your nature. So we are already there. We're already in the process. It's not something yet to come. We're certainly mobile. I mean, it's not like, okay, you're connected to a certain spiritual community and you're going to stay there no matter what. I mean, we're moving all the time, and the idea is we can take charge of that. We can become our own spiritual navigators if we look to be a cool person, be a good person, be friendly, work to kind of push the ego back. What we're all really doing already. So that's a little bit about the spiritual world and its effect on us, and there's plenty more of that in Swedenborg, and we'll be getting to even more of it here, but just a good little intro to that concept. So back to the text. And this is an interesting little caveat that he has here. Actually, we are not visible as spirits in our spiritual communities while we are living in the world because we are thinking on the physical level. So he's talking about the physical level and thinking on. So in the spiritual world is the internal world. We all have experience with spirit because we all have these internal phenomena, which are thoughts and feelings and the stuff in our consciousness that's not coming in from the world outside. And he's saying that Swedenborg says that the spiritual world is run by the sort of the forces that are going on inside us. So thought and feeling have a lot to do with how things appear externally there. So he's saying that depending on what we're thinking about, even though we have these spirits that are in the spiritual world, we're not visible there unless we are kind of pulled out of thinking superficially. If we're thinking with depth and thinking about things that would resonate with the things that people on the other side are thinking about, which are more interior, core level things, he says that we can actually appear there, which I think is a really interesting idea, that we can be seen there. So let's look back at the text. However, if our thinking is directed away from our bodies, we are sometimes visible in our communities because we are then in the spirit. When we are visible, it is easy to tell us from the spirits who live there because we walk along deep in thought, silent, without looking at others, as though we did not see them. And at the moment any spirit speaks to us, we disappear. So that's just like, a fascinating little tangent that he throws in there, which is, just so you know, yeah, we're spirits in a body, and just so you know, your spirit can be seen in the other world. If you're kind of removed from what we would call kind of materialistic or superficial concerns, there you're walking along, but you're obviously like not there today. Like, and if anyone comes up to you and tries to talk with you, you disappear. This is what Swedenborg reported. I haven't experienced it myself, but it is a very fascinating concept, and it's kind of cool. Okay, so I've been talking at you for a while. I said we were going to take questions, and we're really going to do it. If you're just joining us, if you want to be part of the discussion, we're happy to have a lot of input. If you want to leave a question or a comment that we'll get to live here, what you do is just, if you're watching on YouTube, just leave a comment like you on any YouTube video, and we'll get to it. Or if you came here via Facebook and don't have an account, go leave your comment back where you came from, and we'll try to find it and bring it here. Okay, so let's get to our first question here. Does Swedenborg mention anything about guardian angels? Yeah, this one came out of YouTube. So guardian angels, yeah, that is a popular topic. I mean, especially lately, sort of this idea that we're being protected and we're being cared for and we're with angelic beings or their guardians or something like that is a very a very popular idea because a lot of people are experiencing it. And Swedenborg certainly would concur with that notion. He's had a lot to say about the way that heaven or angels are interacting with us. The first thing that comes to mind is he said that we always have at least two angels with us. And that it's not just two for no reason. One angel who's working with our feelings and one angel who's working with our thoughts. And that they are each trying to bend those in a way that's going to be helpful to us and useful to our spiritual life. So there can certainly be more angelic help than just those two. And as we were just talking about, we're in a community. We can be in a heavenly community right now. So the idea is that we can be connected to whole groups of angels. And certainly you don't have to take my word for it. A lot of people have this phenomenon of, something was gonna happen, but I heard a voice that told me to go this way, or when this hard thing was happening, I got a comforting presence. So maybe some of you watching have even had that experience, but certainly Swedenborg had a lot to say about that and said that, yeah, we're never left all the way alone. So let's take the next question. Do you think our angelic/hellish natures are predetermined, or do you think that we've chosen it from a neutrality? And that's a great question. That one came out of YouTube, and it's a big deal because if it was just predetermined, it would seem like, oh, wow, why do some people get hooked up with an angelic nature and some people have a more human nature? And there's a lot to say about that. First of all, we all have different levels of baggage, I'd say. And baggage can be caused by life events, but also just some people we have these internal inherited traits that make things. Some people never struggle with never have to struggle with stealing or lying or gossiping, while other people are constantly trying to keep themselves out of that. So um, it's not the same starting point for everyone. And Swedenborg says that we mainly shape our nature leaning towards heavenly or hellish based on where we go from our starting point. If we're someone who has a lot on our plate, like we have all kinds of inherited tendencies toward negative things, and we have a lot of rough stuff happen to us in our lives, it's not like, oh, we're going to get graded on it. It's more that did you make an effort? What do you want? It's more, what do you want deep inside, and what do you really value? It's not about like a point system, like how many times have you failed. It's like what are your goals? What are your needs? That's where it comes from. And so and no matter what, if you're here on the planet, it's never too late to make a turnaround. You can always, even if you've been living one way, you Christmas Carol, which is just this version of the Christmas Carol where Ebenezer Scrooge has this whole turnaround. He starts living differently, changing the way he is, and that we have that same kind of agency to move through our life. So there's a lot more to say about it, but basically there is, is it nature or nurture? There's stuff that we start dealing with, but it's a lot about where we go from what we have. All right, so let's get to our last question for this segment, then we'll get back to the text. How do you reconcile Swedenborg's message with that of other NDEs or the Bible, for example? NDEs appear to be very subjective. Can we take Swedenborg as authority on the matter? That's from YouTube, and it's great. It's a great point. It does seem like people have this huge range of experiences, and yeah, why are we focusing on Swedenborg so much in this one? Swedenborg, and I'll try not to forget that Bible thing too. Swedenborg is unique for a couple of reasons. One is depth of experience. You have people who have a near-death experience, and it lasts for it doesn't really last for an amount of time. People say the spiritual world doesn't have time, but they have it and then it's over, and they can look back on it and they say, it changed my life. I can still remember it like it was today, but it was over. But Swedenborg was having constant experiences for decades, almost 3 at the end of his life. And from that, he kind of got to a place where it wasn't even novel for him anymore, and he could just objectively record everything and write it down, and he gained a lot of information that way. So that's what's interesting about Swedenborg's accounts, and what kind of sets him apart, and what really makes it a good sort of like a trail guide, or a map that's describing the afterlife. There is a lot of subjectivity in all kinds of experiences, and there is in his experiences. And he'll say that this is how it seemed to me at the time, but he seems to have a grasp of sort of the laws that govern the appearances. You know what I mean? It's not just like Swedenborg went and visited a country. It's like he went and learned the laws of physics there, and he learned the laws of how chemistry works and gravity. He writes about the root causes and the nature of things. So that's why it's interesting, and that you'll see that the phenomena he describes showing up in other people's near-death experiences, but he has this whole backstory as to this is why. This is the mechanics of why that kind of stuff appears like it does. So that's why I find him interesting, and hopefully if you're somebody who's interested in near-death experiences or spiritual experiences, Swedenborg can be a good addition to that. It doesn't have to be an authority that has the last word on everything. Obviously, everyone's got their own experience, but it's a cool addition. And as far as the Bible goes, Swedenborg was a huge Bible fan, and actually his whole view of the afterlife, he said, matched up with things in the Bible. And he wrote the most of his material was on that. I mean, his longest series of books. So I don't know if I can get into it right now, but basically he was saying that the Bible, taken symbolically, is describing these same processes that people are finding through their near-death experiences and all that. All right, so we're going to move on. Those were really good thoughts and questions. Let's get back to the text for a little bit and see what we can find. Okay, so we're going down, moving to the top of page 13. If you're just joining us, this is the PDF of Swedenborg's Our Life After Death. You can find it on swedenborg.com. It's a free download there. Okay, he says, I got to get to my next. The first experience being, sorry, I didn't realize we hadn't quite read this little paragraph here, because I suddenly realized, hey, this doesn't make any sense. Now we got it. To illustrate the fact that we are spirits inwardly, I would like to explain from personal experience what happens when we are taken out of the body and how we are carried away by the spirit to another place. These are two kinds of experiences that Swedenborg is going to describe to us as we move along here. The first experience, being taken out of the body, is like this. We are brought into a particular state of being that is halfway between sleep and waking. When we are in, I think in modern times we would call this state between sleep and waking the hypnagogic state. If you've heard that. When we are in this state, it seems exactly as though we were awake. All our senses are as alert as they are when we are fully awake physically, sight, hearing, and amazingly touch, which is then more exquisitely keen than it can ever be during physical wakefulness. This is the state in which people have seen spirits and angels most vividly, even hearing them, and strange to say, touching them, with hardly anything physical interfering. So you see there, a lot of people I've heard describing experiences will say that, yeah, they could hear an angel's voice, or even that I remember somebody recently telling me that something had just happened in their life that was really traumatic, and they felt angels' hands on their back, just a sort of a comforting presence. So you have here he's talking about sort of this sensory, almost physical experience, because he says that the physical is out of the way, and you sort of have spirit to spirit touching there. Okay, so getting back to the text, it is a state described as being taken out of one's body and not knowing whether one is in one's body or outside it. And see here, someone had mentioned the Bible before. He's referencing 2 Corinthians, which is a book of the Bible in the New Testament. And there he's connecting the two. He's saying, like, look, what I've experienced here, this is what people are talking about when they are saying being taken out of one's body and not knowing whether one is in one's body or outside it. So that's one little connection. He has a bunch of more connections between the Old and New Testaments and sort of this world of experience, but there's a little one there. So that's just kind of him making this bridge between the sacred text and the living experience. And it's one of the fascinating things about Swedenborg is how he can link all these things that seem different. He can take them and put them together. And really, I was just talking with somebody on the web who was saying that Swedenborg was the first time that they could really bridge the gap between religion, philosophy, and psychology, and that's part of what's cool about Swedenborg. We're getting a little sense of it reading his stuff there, but if you look at his whole body of work, there are these huge areas of life that he connects and puts together, and that's kind of what's exciting, is to start to look at the whole thing as a unit. That there's not all these separate disciplines, that we're all talking about the same reality. All right, so let's get back to the text. He's talking about this state of being taken out of the body. I have been admitted to this state 3 or 4 times, simply to let me know what it was like. And again, this is touching on that idea that Swedenborg was given these experiences so that he could learn and report about them. And also to teach me that spirits and angels have the use of all the senses so do we, with respect to our spirits when we are taken out of our bodies. So yeah, he's driving home the point that, hey, life in the spirit is like life here in some ways. You still hear, you still see, you still feel. And while that's a pretty common idea today, when he was writing, which was the 1750s, that a lot of people thought that there were people who thought you do survive after death, but you're sort of in a dim state of semi-consciousness, or you're disembodied consciousness or something like that. So there's a lot of different ideas about it, but he's saying what modern near-death experiences are saying, which is, hey, you can still see, and you can still meet your grandmother who died, and she's still a person, and you are too. All right, so let's take a little time to get back to some questions and comments, see what other people are saying about these topics. The first one, could you talk a little bit about Swedenborg's take on the second coming? Sure, I would talk about anything that you guys want to talk about. So the second coming is this idea in Christianity, in the Christian tradition, because Jesus Christ made these remarks that are saying and implying, I'm going to come back. And there's been sort of a traditional belief that means Jesus Christ is going to come back as a person, and according to some schools of thought, the world is going to suffer this time of tribulation then, or good people are going to be pulled out to meet with him up there. And Swedenborg was saying that there is going to be a second coming, but it's not a second coming of the person of Jesus Christ. What he said is the second coming is a coming in the understanding of the human race. That God was first coming down as Jesus to teach, but now that connection's been established, it's a coming. The second coming is a coming inside all of us. The idea that as our minds open to being more spiritual, more connected, more empathetic, more understanding people, that's when the second coming is taking place, and it's taking place with the human race as a whole. And Swedenborg says that it actually began back around when he was writing, which was the 1700s, and so that at that point a change was happening in the spiritual world, which, as we're reading, is what affects our consciousness. And I mean, there certainly has been a change in the human race since then. I mean, you see the emergence of human rights, and people reaching beyond nationalism. The world has still got a lot of rough things about it, but there have been a lot of really good things that have sprung up since then. This sort of freedom of ideas and of speech and everything. Is that a symptom of it? I don't know, but that's the briefest of intros. Swedenborg's idea of the second coming and what that would mean. So let's go to the next question here. So if we are living in the interspace between heaven and hell, how do we keep our will, our motives, desires, and loves in a state of goodness? So I'm just impressed by all of these because it's good thoughts, and it's questions that I would hope people would ask, because there's certainly things that would be on my mind if I was watching. So yeah, Swedenborg says we are in balance between heaven and hell. And it's not too hard to see that. And you just looking at the human race as a whole, I mean, you can easily look at it and say, oh, it's terrible. There's all this war and this suffering and these crimes. But you can also look at it and say, oh, it's beautiful. There's so much love. And there's both. And you can even see it in us. You can see it in little kids, that they can be so cute and so loving to each other, and then turn around and they're stealing each other's toys and they're pushing each other. And so there's this balance in all of us. So the question was asking, how do we keep ourselves good? How do we tip that balance toward the heavenly side? And Swedenborg basically says our job is to block the negative. The good will come on its own if we clear the negative. And so he talks about what he would call regeneration. Or repentance, and he says that if you can basically deny your ego. I mean, if you're, and this is an idea that's in all kinds of programs and schools of thought, that if you're getting an urge to do something, like I'm going to snap at this person, I'm going to cut this person off, I'm going to steal this thing, whatever, all the way down to the worst things that we can do. If you feel it and that urge wants to come and manifest through you, but you say, even though there's a part of me that wants to do this, I'm not going to do it because it's not right. That is the foundation of spiritual growth. And that the more that we do that, the more that we put our effort into that, the more the good starts to flow in, because heaven is connected to us. Heaven wants to come in all the time. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. That quote from Jesus that Swedenborg says means that heaven is wanting to come in. God is wanting to come in with good things. All we have to do is clear the way out. And so the more we work on that, the more that the goodness can come in. I mean, obviously, getting your mind right helps. I mean, even down to like get your nutrition right. You know, if you're hungry or you're tired, it's a lot harder to fight the good fight. But you know, dispelling what Swedenborg would call falsities. You know, I think about that a lot of antagonism between people is based on misconceptions. You know, I'm thinking about prejudice. You know, you have these misconceptions about a group of people, and because you have them, it's blocking goodness there. So the more we can learn truth. And Swedenborg also said learning, you know, spiritual truth, and that's what we're doing as we're moving through here, learning about the spirit world. So in a small way, do things like this. So anyway, we have one more. Let's get to that before we get back to the text. Do you think when having a conversation with someone in the physical world, your spirit can tap into information on the same topic in spirit, like overhearing a spiritual conversation while having a physical one? And I would say, yeah. I mean, I definitely notice that if I'm in some kind of a brainstorm or a group discussion and we're talking about a concept, that I'll get, even if I'm giving input, I'm getting insights that I wouldn't normally get because we're in that conversation. So it definitely seems to me like there's something about that community taps us into to the spiritual world, to higher ideas. Swedenborg says that everything we get in the mind comes in from the spiritual world. You know, whether it's you know, from whatever part it's from, but it's all coming to us from there. So that certainly when we're around the right kind of conversations, we can get this inspiration. You know, and I would say I think that's a tapping in, because I've very clearly had it where I'm trying to work on a problem and I don't have solutions, but I get together with someone and I'm talking about it, and then something new pops in that I never would have constructed on my own. So I would say, yeah, everyone's got their own thoughts on it, but I would think so. Thanks for the questions. We'll get to one more question segment before the end of everything. All right, so let's get back to this text here. Remember, we were going through with Swedenborg, and he was talking about this phenomenon of these two different ways that you can have a spiritual experience. So we talked about the first one. The second one, he says, as for the second kind of experience, being carried away by the Spirit to another place, I have been shown by first-hand experience what happens and how it happens, but only 2 or 3 times. I should like to cite just one experience. While I was walking through city streets and through the countryside, absorbed in conversation with spirits. So Swedenborg is, you know, it got to be the norm for him that he would be absorbed in conversation with spirits. The barriers to the spiritual world were so far down that every day he was having these conversations. It seemed exactly as though I were just as awake and observant as ever, walking without getting lost, though all the while I was having visions. I was seeing woods, rivers, mansions, houses, people, and more. And after I had been walking for some hours, though, I suddenly found myself back in an awareness of my physical sight and realized that I was somewhere else. I was utterly amazed by this and realized that I had been in a state of those people who are described as being carried away by the Spirit to another place. So, let me just read this before we get into it. For as long as it lasted, I was not thinking about my route, even though it may have been many miles, or about the time, though it might have been many hours or even days. I was not conscious of any fatigue either. This is how we can be led by routes we know nothing of, right to some predetermined place without becoming lost. So did you follow that? What he's saying is, he was walking along in the world wherever he was living in London. Maybe it was, you know, he moved a few places, but let's say he was in London. So he was walking around as Swedenborg, looking at things, walking down streets, functioning in the world, but in his mind he was in the spiritual world. He was not even conscious of where it was physically. He was seeing, he was having conversations with people in the spiritual world. He was seeing scenes there and landscapes. And then suddenly he got snapped back into his body and was like, oh, where am I? You know, like his body had been walking the whole time, almost like sleepwalking that we experience now. But he was saying that's what happened to him. But he says only a couple times. You know, that this just happened a few times so that he could learn what it was like. And if you see that he goes you know, into these states a few times, but as we'll see, coming up. It's not his normal method of contacting the spiritual world, but it just gives you an idea of how much is really going on in the diversity of experience. So we got 2 paragraphs left to make it through here, and these are just kind of a little wrap up of the last 2 experiences. And if you guys want to get your questions in, ask them now. Write a comment on the YouTube video or on Facebook if you're coming from there, and we'll get to them in the end. Let's hear the end of this chapter and what Swedenborg has to say. These 2 states of being, though, which are states we have when we are awake to our deeper nature, or, which is the same thing, to our spirit, are out of the ordinary. They were shown me simply to teach me what they were like because people in the church know of them. When he says people in the church, he's talking about the Christian church of his day. When he was writing, Europe was a theocracy. I mean, there was the Christian church, and it was in all facets of life. So he's giving a nod to his audience. And this was back in the day when books would not be really circulated outside your niche. Like they would be read by people in Europe, that were similar to him. It's not like today where you write a book or make a YouTube video and everybody in the world can see it. So that's why he refers to the church like that. So they were shown me simply so that I could know of them. But talking with spirits, being with them as one of them, this is something that was granted me to do when I was fully awake physically, and it has been so for many years. And so that was his normal mode. I mean, this book that he wrote, I mean, the information he got here, the information for all his books, that was when he was in this, not in either of those 2 states he described, but in this other one where it's just hanging out like you and I are right now, like you're sitting with people in the room, but he could speak in that alert state to spirits and see things and learn things. So that was how he got the majority of his information for all of this stuff. So saying that we are spirits in our inner self is the same as saying that the things that have to do with our thinking and willing are spiritual. And this is part of the duality that Swedenborg is always mentioning, this thinking and willing. And that's, basically thinking and feeling. And he says that those are our 2 basic faculties. Have to do with our thinking and willing are spiritual, because thinking and willing actually are our inner being. So in case you didn't catch that, I mean, he's saying that there are thoughts and feelings, that those are our spirit. Those processes are going on in the spirit. The consciousness is the spirit. They are what make us human, and the kind of human beings we are depends on what our thinking and our willing are like. And that goes back a little bit to somebody saying, if we're communicating with heaven and hell, how do we stay connected with heaven? He says, our thinking and our willing. What are your motives and what thoughts are you entertaining? And that is forming the spirit. And a lot of Swedenborg's work is kind of a handbook to how to best grow your spirit while you're on the planet. To wrap up here, before we get to the questions, I want to do a little Swedenborgian exercise. So we've been hearing a lot of information. I want to go a little towards the emotional side here. It comes out of his idea of correspondences, or he was saying that the natural world reflects the spiritual world. So the things that we see out in nature and the elements are images, in a way, of the processes that we go through in our mind and heart. And we want to look at water today. And Swedenborg says that water corresponds to truth. And what that means is what water does on a physical level, the truth does on a spiritual level. Does that make sense? So you think about what does water mean to us as people. We need it to survive. You have to drink water. Water composes our bodies, just as truth can compose the spirit, and you need the truth to make it, to have spiritual life. Water is for washing, just like the truth can really clear up a situation. So what we're going to do here is, Swedenborg says that you can kind of tap into this if, when you're seeing the physical thing that symbolizes the reality, you're thinking about the spiritual reality. So we're going to look at just 30 seconds of images of water, and when you're looking at that, be thinking about the truth, and that, hey, I'm seeing an image of the truth. And then hopefully you can get some insight, or some kind of deeper inkling of that will tell you more about the nature of truth. So we got nothing to lose. Let's just try it out. So here is some images. Think of the truth as you see the water. You can see it in all these different forms. It can be peaceful, it can be powerful, and I think you find different truths and different concepts can have that. Some are calming, and some can just have so much power in your life and in the way that you can reach out to people. So let's get to some more questions here to end, as we look at, if you're watching this, you're not live, you didn't have a chance to ask a question here, you can still ask one. Just write it in the comment section, and we'll try to get to it next week. The first question that we answered this week was actually from last week, so you can definitely do that. It doesn't have to be a live thing, but we do have some live questions now, so let's get to those. This is from Facebook. Hi, I find your words and explanations very helpful. Thank you very much. I am a spiritual medium and sometimes find it difficult to explain. What are your thoughts on the purpose of mediums? Well, thanks very much. Really glad that the explanations are helpful. That's what we're trying to do, and it's a great question. So what it basically is a subset of the question of why are we all like we are? And I do get some people I work with, getting these concepts out to people, and you have some people who have all kinds of contact and spiritual experiences, and some people who have nothing, who never have had anything supernatural. And sometimes you get people, well, why do some people have such connection? Why do other people not? And I sort of feel like it's whatever the answer is, it's the same answer. Why are some people good at sports and other people aren't good at sports? Why are some people good at music and other people aren't? We all have a use. Swedenborg has this quote, we are not born for the sake of ourselves, but for the sake of others. And that we all have the potential to contribute to the human race in our own special way. He compares heaven, or what's the same, everybody on earth can be working together in a heavenly way, like the human body. And that we have a diversity of skills. I've got hands and eyes and ears and all that. They all perform different functions. And if I didn't have any of them, it would be harder to live. And I sort of see all the different things people can do. It's like that. Swedenborg says that's what makes up the grand human being. So as far as if you particularly have a gift, to see the other side, you probably are seeing the use of it in the people that you interact with. I mean, there certainly is. I come across so many people that have, especially who've lost somebody that they love, and they're so sad because they can't get any contact. Maybe that's the function, is that you can be showing people, hey, this is, first of all, this is real. I mean, that's one of, I think, what Swedenborg says his missions was to say this exists, and that just knowing that, even for those of us who can't experience the spiritual level viscerally, that can mean something. And then, certainly, the idea that, okay, well, you can be a channel. Some of us can't get through, but you can. So I would see comfort. I would see, reassurance that this stuff is really happening. And then who knows? I mean, who knows where it's going to take you? I mean, it took Swedenborg to writing these books, which led us to have this class now, which people are hopefully enjoying to some extent. I can't say exactly what's going to go on in your life or anyone's life, but something good. And the best way that we can prep for that is just to follow the good. Continually try to look, what is God trying to do here? What is love and goodness trying to do here? So obviously I can't give a better answer. than that, although there's much more that could be said. But thank you very much for that. All right, let's take a look at the next one. My son was killed 8/18/2012, and 3 days after he died, he texted me from his phone, which was locked. I'm blessed and grateful. He said he was still here, and him and his papa were not alone. What do you think about that? Because Verizon said it was impossible. My son's phone was on a 4-digit code lock, and to this day, I haven't broken it. Well, that's awesome. First of all, what I want to say is thank you for sharing your story, because that's a really personal thing. But what I've always found is that when somebody shares something personal, other people resonate with it. So thank you for that. And then what I would say is, I mean, my first feeling is, yeah, man, they can reach us. There's a lot of ways they can reach us. And why wouldn't technology be a way? Because what Swedenborg says is, it's not like you kind of think of like technology, oh, there's the spiritual world and then there's technology, but the spiritual world and the physical world, everything we see in the physical world comes from the spiritual world. That's the origination point, and then the trend seeps into this world. So whatever systems we're using here, they have the root of them somehow. So I mean, the world is big, and there's all kinds of stuff going on, and I certainly would think that somebody could reach out through a phone, and what a lovely thing to have them say. So thank you for sharing that with us, and I think that things like that really give people something to connect to, and maybe even these other people I'm talking about who have lost somebody but haven't had some kind of connection like that. So thank you very much. Okay, we're going to do two more. One is, amazing, thank you for explaining what I have known but didn't know. And that's from YouTube. And great, thank you. I'm so glad that you're enjoying the concepts and the ideas. And I like it when I hear that, because I will. So in working with the Swedenborg Foundation and getting Swedenborg's ideas out to people, I'll often get that response of people will say, oh yeah, this is what I kind of always believed. And Swedenborg does say that there is sort of a universal inflow of the deeper truths of life into all of us, but it's quiet and it's hard to hear unless you're really looking for it. But many of us from that have this kind of sense of this is how things are, and so if you see it out there, in what Swedenborg wrote, oh yeah, that's what it is. So that's cool. Thank you for sharing, and we'll get to our last one here. From Facebook, the book talks about our being joined with heaven and hell while living in this world. Which has more effect on our thoughts and moods, the influence of heaven and hell or worldly events? And that is okay. So obviously I'm not a very tough judge of questions, because every single one I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so good. I think that one is really good, because it basically comes down to what has a bigger impact on our lives as human beings, the mind or the circumstances. You would initially think, oh, circumstances, because if some bad event is happening in my life, I feel bad. If some good event, but if I step back and really look at people and what they're going through, it seems like actually the internal world has a bigger impact than the external world. That there can be somebody whose external circumstances are really good. What they have, things that you'd think were desirable, wealth, good living situation, no major issues with close relatives or something like that, but yet they're not happy. And you can have people who get all kinds of success and yet aren't happy, and you can have people who things are going poorly but they have this sense of calm. And just look in your own life and an event that you look at, some event that at one point you really felt this way about it, and now you feel a totally different way in the same event. It all seems to point to that the inner world has more of an impact than the outer world. Certainly the outer world has an impact, but only rarely does the outer world really force you to feel it. So in that regard, according to Swedenborg, the spiritual world, heaven and hell, really have more to do with how we experience life than what's going on outside, which is kind of encouraging, because it means through spiritual practice, through developing spirituality and learning and working on this kind of spiritual growth, that you can actually hope to really really get a state of mind that can weather the storms of the external world. and that you can find this kind of peace that can be there for you, even because you're never going to be able to have control over the external world, but there's more of a chance to kind of get this going on the internal world. So that we got to end questions there for today. If you have other ones, leave them, and we'll at least get to you via text response to your questions if we don't next week get to them. Thanks, everybody. This has been really fun. We're going to next be looking at the chapter, Our Revival After Death. So we're going to be looking at what it's like to wake up. Finally, if you want to support this program, it's Swedenborg Foundation is run via donations. It's a nonprofit. You can just go to, if you're watching this on YouTube, there's a description for the video there. There is a link. If you click it, make a little PayPal donation, we'll actually get a 5-to-1 matching grant from the foundation, and that will just help get this program out to other people who might enjoy it. So thanks very much for that. We're going to be back next Monday, like we always are, 8 p.m. EDT, and we'll be, as I said, continuing our journey through this book. If you're just joining us, you can download this book at swedenborg.com. It's a free PDF or free ebook. Great questions and comments. I hope you've enjoyed this a little bit. I certainly have, and I look forward to seeing all of you guys coming up next week.